Welcome to Junk Bucket's School of Engine Things. Today we're going to work on a Honda. Today we're going to work on a Honda. Excuse me. Today we're going to work on a Honda and we're going to do the timing belt. Well, a couple of things that I want to let you know before you get started on your Honda timing belt. What is a timing belt? A timing belt is So a timing belt, or in an older vehicle that actually used metal, they had timing chains. That was before velour and all this fancy stuff. It's a thing that makes a physical connection between the crankshaft and the camshaft, allowing them to be timed as they spin around in circles. So, what does that mean for your engine? It allows the valves to be timed with the movement of the uppy-downy upsy-downsy motion of the piston so that your engine can have these 4 strokes in order to make power. As the engine pulls down, so when the engine pulls down, the intake valve opens and it draws air and fuel mixture into the combustion chamber. That is called the intake stroke. There. Then that intake valve closes, the exhaust valve stays closed, and the thing right here goes upward and it compresses that gas and air mixture. That is called the compression stroke. Then the spark plug fires. I forgot to draw a spark plug in here. Spark plug fires and it lights that stuff that's in there and it forces the piston to come back down. That is called the power stroke. Also a Ford truck. Then all that burnt gas and exhaust and things and stuff and unicorns has to come out of the engine, so the exhaust valve opens, the piston moves back up and expels it in the exhaust stroke. A few things that you need to know. Something that you need to know before you work on your car and you're going to do a timing chain or a timing belt replacement. One of the most important things is this: top dead center. You'll hear it all the time. Basically all it means is top dead center is when the piston is at the top of its travel on the compression stroke. That's when both of these valves are closed. Once it's at the top of its travel with both valves closed on the number 1 cylinder of your engine, that's top dead center. That is where you want to set everything so that when you replace your belt, everything goes back to the way that it's supposed to be. There. Another thing that you hear a lot about, Another thing that you're going to hear when you're working on an engine that has the dual overhead cams is interference. I think that says once. No, I didn't forget that line right there. You forgot that line right there. A non-interference engine, if the timing belt breaks, the pistons can move through its normal travel and it's not going to make contact with anything. So you got better chances of saving everything. The main thing that you want to remember before you start is that one right there, top dead center. Once you have that set and you keep everything set at top dead center, it's kind of just a matter of turning bolts to the left until they come out, putting everything back together the way it came apart. Let's get started. Interference engine is what happens at some point in time when there's no connection between the crankshaft and the camshaft. The pistons are moving up and down and the valves are frozen in position. They can contact the piston or interfere with the piston's travel through its motion in the engine. If you have an interference engine, I don't know which ones are or are not, and your timing chain or timing belt breaks, you basically got a bomb on your hands. It's going to beat things up. It's going to be no good for anybody. Okay, we get the joke. You can stop now. Okay. All right. We're going to need access to the crank pulley, and it's covered by this little piece of plastic. We already removed the tire. we got the car up on jack stands. Now we just gotta pop these little clips out. Like that. Boom. Just come out. That hurt. Owie. Alright. Oh, sure. I think we can just move that. And there's the thing we need access to right there. Beautiful. The first thing we're going to do up top is we're going to remove that drive belt that runs the alternator and the power steering pump accessories. And that is usually just that tensioner right there. We're going to pull that back, relieve the tension off the belt, and take that belt off and get it out of our way. And of course, all of these cars, they can't be an American, they got to be an M&M's. So you got to have M&M's tools. And make sure you take all the 10 millimeters and just put them in your pocket so you don't lose them later. Probably not necessary to remove this upper cowling, but I'm going to just pop it off. I'm going to save my arms a little bit, be able to see down. Well, yeah, that didn't help me see nothing. All right. Now, this is actually not that bad. In order to gain access to that timing belt, we need to remove this upper cam cover. It's plastic. This upper cam cover. And then we're going to need to remove this motor mount block here. It connects to here. That'll get us down inside to get that lower engine cover off that's behind the crank pulley. And in order to do that, we just put wrenches in there, turn bolts to the left. I am going to disconnect the battery just to save on things. And then we're going to do the top dead center thing that I was talking about earlier. Once that top dead center is set, we can just get moving along.
Since I feel air coming out.
Well, I've got an extra set of hands now, so I'm going to use them to plug a hole. I found the #1 cylinder. It's over at back here. Of course, Honda put it where you can't get to it because it's the one you need to get to. And all he's going to do is stick his thumb over that spark plug hole. Now that the spark plug's out, I'm going to go down to the bottom and turn the engine over by hand. And when he feels air blowing out of that hole, that will be the compression stroke of the engine. And then I'll bring that timing mark up until it matches the mark on the crank to the mark on the block. That'll be top dead center. All right. If I can turn the engine. wrong socket. That's the wrong one. Dang it. I knew that. Oh, you got it.
Dang it.
Dang it. I'm stuck in the tool holder.
Fully covered by workman's comp.
Right. If you get hurt, you were never here.
No. Fell down outside on driveway.
Right, too far up.
There.
Okay. Now there should be the tiny pointer right here.
If it is, it's engraved. Wait, no, that. Let me just check here real quick.
It's not easily
Accessible.
apparent. Oh, okay, I see it. It's just that little, it's just a little arrow
Yeah,
kind of like molded into the plastic.
yeah.
And then it's going to point at some marks that are just about to show up on this side.
Alright, do you have a flashlight?
Yeah. Magnetic on. Okay, see that arrow? It's like a plastic arrow, right? It's a magnet.
Yeah.
Okay. So that plastic arrow is going to point at these marks that are about to show up on that side.
Uh-huh.
They're going to come up this way. And one of them's kind of got like white marked on it.
Mhm.
You need to line that up with that arrow.
Alright, there's a little nick there. Is that the white mark?
There should be like 4.
No. Okay. Okay. Stop. It's just on the left side?
Of the one that's white colored?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to double check it though, just make sure.
Just on the left side.
You said you wanted it on this side, right?
Just pointing right at that
I went
pointer.
through that hole right
Oh yeah, that's good enough.
there. Is it?
I can move that around a little more later. Actually. Yeah, that looks good. Let's see if we can show that. Okay, so that's top dead center. We spun that around. He held his finger over the spark plug hole until it felt air pump out. That's the compression stroke. Then we continued spinning the crank until that mark on the pulley lines up with that arrow. That's top dead center. Now we can start taking everything apart. All right, we got this upper cam cover off, and you can see there's a mark on the top of that crank pulley. You should be able to see that now. And then there's a mark right there on the timing case, right? Stupid ass camera. So there's a mark right there on the timing, on the case, and then there's a mark right there on that tooth. And we know we set top dead center earlier, so those line up. That's top dead center. That's how the belt will go back together. It'll be the same on the other cam sprocket on the other side. And we'll keep taking stuff apart. Now, in order to get access to your timing belt, your timing marks, and this lower timing belt cover, you're going to have to remove this crank pulley. It's an 18 M&M bolt, and I'm going to use an impact. Make it a little easier. That is not an 18. It's also not a 19. so believe it or not, that is a 3/4 inch dry bolt head. Alright, so to remove this lower pulley, you got to be able to grab that outer nut, apparently, that's cast into the pulley, and then brace that against something, and then you can put all of the muscles into that center bolt and break it loose. And I don't have that tool. You can go rent one at O'Reilly's or borrow one, I think. But I'm not gonna do that. I just measured it. I want one to keep for myself. So I laid it out over here on a heavy piece of steel. And I'm just gonna cut it out real quick with my plasma. And then I'll have one for me for in the future. And then I'll just bend that up where it goes in there like it's supposed to. Good to go. So we made a tool that goes over that cast in nut. I'm just gonna okay. So I got this kind of a setup going on. Now I'm gonna put pressure on this and see if I break my arm first or break that bolt loose.
Or injure your side worker.
Or injure my helper. We don't have a Schwartz one of these, huh?
No, not that.
Just popped it right off. Huh?
Get your money back, right?
That's a brand new impact extender. MPG form. This is what you're giving right here.
Yeah. Did you bring that? Wow, that's solid.
That's a negative on my homemade one. Oh, you just set on it. And there you go. 2 brand new 1/2-inch impact extensions, and just broke them both. So we're gonna try to get some that don't have those little weird collar things on them. Maybe they'll be stronger. They won't have a hole right down the center of them. And we'll try again. Okay, so we finally got that crank bolt out. That's the culprit right there. Once that's out, this lower pulley comes out pretty easy. We ended up having to get some of these black impact extensions, like that one there we snapped off. We did about 4 of those we broke. And that's a pain in the butt. Well, we finally got it. We finally got it out, and I got that cover off. It's just a few 10mm bolts. And now we got to get that aluminum block bracket right there in the middle out. That's actually the front motor mount. And the timing belt is routed around that, so it has to come out. And that is going to be 2 14mm bolts against the block of the car. That's one 10mm bolt holding some plastic. And then 2 14mm bolts right up here on the top. And then that center block should come right out, and we can get to that timing belt. What you want to do though is support the engine before you take those off by just putting a jack under there on the oil pan. And then I would use, I did use, you can see there, a wood block, a 2x4 or something. You don't want to put the jack right on the oil pan. And let's get started. I'm a mechanic. I definitely need an adult. That's just dangling. I need to get that off. 10mm. I'm not going to be able to get that out. So let's get the bottom one. Holy moly. I think everything on this car is just
400 pounds per square inch. Oh, I can see blood coming out of this one.
Lots of blood.
Getting it?
I moved or it moved. Somebody moved. Usually once you turn them, they get really easy. This one doesn't want to get really easy.
It might be because you have it jacked up a tad.
Is it putting pressure against that?
Yeah, it might be.
Well, I was able to grab that top one and move it. It wiggles right around. There's no pressure on it.
Yeah, I know, but the bottom one may
No,
have...
not the bolt. There's nowhere to be putting pressure on it, Ken.
Yeah, you're right.
Because it would have to be pushing on this. And there's no pressure there. Uh-oh.
Don't say that.
I hope it's not galling the threads out.
Unless you have one of those ratchet
I do
sockets.
have a 14mm ratcheting wrench though.
Yeah. You want me to get it?
Sure.
You have it hanging up?
Yep, it's hanging up on the right side where all the metric stuff is.
9mm?
14. Give it a little boink. Let's see if it pops it loose.
Feels like there's another one in there, huh? still recording?
I have no idea. It should be. Do you see a little number counting down there?
See? It's all coming together now.
Maybe the other way. Nope, that ain't gonna work.
Who would have thought that?
Yeah, there's a bolt hidden right there. Don't miss that. Okay, so now we got that engine block off, or the engine mount block off. The crank pulley is off. All the cam covers are off. All the timing belt covers are off. So now we can see that belt clearly. And you can see that one pulley right down there. Let me see if I got something to point with. You can see there's one pulley right here. That pulley right there. That's the tensioner. And you're going to have to take that tensioner pulley off. There's no way to relieve the pressure out that without actually removing the two bolts that hold that tensioner pulley on. And that'll relieve the pressure off the belt, and then you can slip the belt off. At this point, what you'll want to do before you take that off is just ensure that your marks are lined up like here. Those look good. I already checked the crank, so we're ready to just take the belt off. Okay, so I loosened that bottom bolt, and when I did, it let that tensioner spin out of the way. So now there's no tension on this timing belt. And we're just gonna go ahead and pop it right off. Timing belt off. And now, since we've come this far, while we're in here, we should just change that water pump.
Yeah.
Since we're already that far into it, now's the time to do it. Then it's a matter of putting the timing belt back on.
Do you have the water pump?
Yep. Okay, so we finally got that timing belt off. Now we could start to put the new one back on, but since we're already in here, the water pump is inside there once you've got all of this stuff off the front and the timing belt off. So now's the time to change that water pump, then you don't have to go back in there and do it later. Once that's on, it's a simple matter of putting the timing belt back on the way it came off, bolting everything back on. Okay, we got the old water pump out and the new water pump getting ready to go back in. I'm gonna show you a little trick. This is the new one. We already transferred that pulley over. But on these water pumps, usually every one of these bolts is a different length, and you don't want to lose track of those. So what I do is I set the new water pump somewhere up here, and as I take each bolt out, I drop it back into the corresponding hole that it came out of. Now that I'm ready to put the new water pump back in, I transferred all the bolts out of this to the old water pump, and I'll be able to take them out of each spot and put them right back into the corresponding locations, and I don't lose track of how long the bolts for each hole are. One thing that we did have to deal with on this is on the old water pump, right here and here, there's two little locating roll pins. In the new water pump, they don't press in here and here. They float here. On the old water pump, they pressed into those two locations. So what we had to do is take them out of the old water pump. And if you could see here, we had to, there it is right there. I don't know how well you can see that. This thing's not. But we had to place them in the actual block instead of in the pump itself. There's another one right there. You can see that one. So now those will center the new water pump. You just have to remove them from the old water pump and put them in the block. And now they work just fine centering this new water pump, whatever the hell that was. All right, let's get it back in there, huh? All right, so we're ready to replace this timing belt tensioner with the new timing belt tensioner, and you'll notice it's got a hand grenade pin on it. What that does is it holds that plunger down until you have the bolts installed, the timing belt in place. Once that's all done and you know everything's right, you pull this pin out and the plunger presses against that pulley, the tensioner pulley, and tensions the belt. Keep this pin. I've had to make them sometimes. If you don't want to replace this, let's say a timing belt broke and you're not doing the 100,000 mile warranty and you just want to replace the timing belt, you can put this in a vise and press that back down and repin it and reuse the old one. But usually when you buy a kit, this comes with it. It's a cheap, inexpensive replacement. So here we go. Okay, so we got the new belt back on. You can see that we got those marks to line up. The mark on the sprocket to that mark on the casting. It's the same way for the other cam sprocket. You line that mark up. And then that crank sprocket down there, you can see that little square keyway on top of it. That needs to be in the 12 o'clock position. And then there's two really small, hard to see marks that are engraved on the sprocket and on the engine the same way these two cam sprockets are engraved. And then we got the tensioner back in. We pulled that pin out. There's tension on the belt. All the marks are lining up. So now we want to ensure before we go and start this car that all of those timing marks are perfect. So what we're going to do is put a bolt back on that crank sprocket, and I'm going to rotate the crank 2 full rotations until that mark on the crank comes up on its mark, comes up on the mark, and then pass it once back around, back up on its mark. Once you rotate that crank 2 full rotations and put the mark right back where it's supposed to be, that mark on the cam sprocket and that mark on the block should line up again on both cam sprockets after you've made those 2 full revolutions. Only 1 revolution is going to put... Jesus Christ.
Your pointer? Not a clue.
If you only do 1 revolution, then this mark right here on the sprocket is going to be at the 6 o'clock position. So if you do 2 full revolutions on the crank, it'll bring this back up to this top dead center position where it'll line up with this mark. And after you've done that and both of these cam sprockets line back up, then you're guaranteed that you're not a tooth off on this timing belt. You can see that there's a lot of teeth on that timing belt that match with the sprocket. It's really not that hard to be a tooth off and not even realize it. All there has to be is a little bit of slack in the belt somewhere, which is pretty hard to do because they go on pretty tight, but I've seen it done. You can see those marks line up. So now I'm going to do 2 full revolutions and we should see those marks come right back up. So right there, we're lining up good. And boom, lined up perfectly. Okay, so that ensures that our timing belt is on correctly. Now it's just a matter of putting everything back together and start this thing up. All right. We got the timing belt on, we got all of the covers back on. Now we're just doing a quick spark plug change, and then we're gonna fire this bad boy up after we put some antifreeze in it. One trick to these spark plugs, you always want to put a little bit of anti-seize on there. Anytime you're screwing steel or stainless steel into aluminum, there's a chance it can gall and it'll freeze in place. So just put a little anti-seize on them. Make sure you're going the right way, and then we're good to go. Hand wrench on there and nip these up. Done. Now we're going to put a little bit of antifreeze back in it to replace what fell out when we opened up the water pump. And we rotated that crank 2 times like I showed you and made sure those timing marks lined back up, and that guarantees us that none of that belt is off by a tooth or 2 teeth. Right back on. if it's gonna happen and you rotate that twice, and one of those marks is gonna be off 2 or 3 teeth. It'll be very visible. So as long as you get those 2 full rotations of the crank sprocket and all of your timing marks lined back up, then your timing is a-okay. All right, do it.
Yeah.
Got some water standing in there. All right. Moment of truth. Everything should be back together. That back up. Let's see what happens. Is the key in here? No, I'm gonna leave that in there. We don't have the tire back on yet. What did I do with the key? There's the key. All right. Let's see if it exploded. This is. When do you gotta push the brake? Oh, you stupid thing. Sweet. Sounds good. Let's circulate. I'll probably draw that down a little bit once the engine warms up. And that is a timing belt done. All right, everybody. That's a Honda timing belt done. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Tell all your friends. We'll do more fun stuff. Some people's kids, man.